Alrighty, so today I'm going to show you how to make Grimmjow's pants, also known as the Hakama. Please excuse me if I butcher any of these words, as I am an American and I do not speak any Japanese. For this tutorial, you are going to need McCalls pattern M7131 as pictured here. This tutorial can also be used to make any other Soul Reaper Hakama from Bleach or any other cosplay character or costume, or if you just need to learn how to sew this pattern. This is not going to be cosplay specific, so if you are just having trouble understanding this pattern, please feel free to continue watching this video because it will be able to help you. Now, these pants are not going to be historically accurate or if you are using them for cosplay or a play, but this pattern can be modified and used as a base pattern for anything you're doing. Now, to use this pattern for both Grimmjow or Shinigami such as Rukia, all you need to do is change where you measure for the waist. As you can see, Rukia or any other Shinigami wear their Hakama very high, whereas Grimmjow wears his pants very low. Now I jumped one size up using a size 14 for Rukia and a 16 for Grimmjow. This is just to make up for the wider area at the hips and to allow maximum comfort when sitting and eating. My actual waist is also more slender than my hips, so a smaller size waistband higher up just worked better for me. Now if you're a little more rectangular and don't have a dip in your waist, you should be able to get away with using the same pattern for both. This can be used for both men and women as they are just pants and they're pants. They're not gender-based. Another difference is the hem length. Since Rukia wears her pants very high, these pants will end up very long, whereas Grimmjow wears his pants very low, so these pants will need to be hemmed shorter to accommodate where you will be wearing them on your body. Take this into consideration if you're going to be cosplaying more than one character. Just make sure you are hemming them correctly and measuring your waist correctly for the area that they are going to be worn. Alright, so if you're going to be using this tutorial to cosplay as Grimmjow, there's a few other things you're going to need, which I will be going through in other tutorials, but just so you know, to get started, you are also going to need the waraji, which are the shoes, which are going to be in white, the tabi, which are the socks, which will be in black, the hakama, which are the pants that we'll be making today, which are in white, and a black obi, which is the belt, and he does not wear a traditional kasode and shitagi, so you will be making basically just a half jacket. And also don't forget that you will need his facial piece, a blue wig, which I will be showing where to get mine in later videos, and do not forget the most important piece, the Zenpekto. Now, if you're going to be using this video to cosplay as Rukia, or any other Shinigami, you will need the waraji, which are the shoes, and you will need them in the woven grass, just the tan color, which I will be doing a video on how to do those. You will need white tabi, which are the socks, a black kasode, and a white shitagi. The kasode is the shirt, and the shitagi is the undershirt that you can just barely see. Black hakama, which are the pants that we are making today, and then a very long obi, which is the belt. I will be putting in which wig I bought in the description below. It is from ARDAWIGS. They're very high quality wigs, and it's held up very well in storage as well. Haven't lost the style at all. And you will also need the most important piece, which is her Zenpekto. To start your pants, the easiest way is to use the McCalls pattern M7131. This pattern goes up to a size 24, and for these specific pants we'll be using pattern E. On the back of the package, you can see what size to choose based on waist and hip measurements. Remember, when measuring, that Grimmjow wears his pants lower than what this pattern shows, so be sure to measure accordingly. Down below, you can see how much fabric is needed for each size. You'll need your white fabric, fusible interfacing, and elastic. For my pants, I chose a very light, slightly stretchy fabric. Grimmjow's pants are very flowy, so keep that in mind when choosing a fabric the most comfortable for you. Now we're going to skip over cutting out the pattern pieces, as this is a very easy step and you can just do this on your own following the pattern's instructions. For step 1, you're going to take both patterns 1 and pin the right sides together, then stitch from upper edge to notch. Now lay your fabric wrong sides up and match the inner edges that will be the crotch. Make sure everything is even and pin in place, leaving enough extra fabric for a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Now take your pinned fabric and place it on your machine, being sure to keep a 5/8 inch seam line by either using the markings on your sewing machine or by measuring with a ruler and marking where you're going to sew. Be sure to go back and forth over your first stitch to lock it in place. I chose a stretchy and slippery fabric, so I kept it taut while sewing to keep an even stitch. Remember to only sew to the notch, which is the small triangle you should have cut out on your pattern. If you did not cut out your notch, just line your pattern piece on top of your fabric and mark where it should be. Step 2 is going to be the pleats. The first thing you're going to need to do is mark your pleat dots. Follow the lines for your size. Now you're going to fold your pants in half and sew one straight line on your center pleat line, sewing from the top to your bottom dot and no further. Basically what this is going to do is make an open rectangle. In step 3, you're going to want to pin your center pleat flat and baste. Basting is just a quick line of sewing to hold your garment together instead of using pins. Before moving on, make sure you put your pleat dots on the front of both pant legs. For step 4, you're going to be making the rest of your pleats. With your fabric right side up, take a crease where your small circles are on your pattern and bring that crease over to the accompanying large circles. Repeat this for all of your pleats and pin in place. Now all you have to do is baste across all of your pleats. Remember to keep your 5/8 inch seam allowance. Step 5 is the start of your pockets. If you've never made pockets before, don't worry, they're super easy. Lay your pants right side up, finding the curve where your pocket will be. Take pattern pieces too, and doing one at a time, lay the pocket piece wrong side up, matching the notches. Make sure everything is lined up perfectly, then pin with your 5/8 inch seam allowance. Sew your pocket piece on, starting at the top and follow the curve of the pocket. Do not sew down the pant leg, just follow the curve of the pocket. For steps 6 and 7, you're first going to turn your pockets to the inside, basically so your pants are wrong side up and your pockets are right side up. You're going to need pattern pieces 3 and line them up over your pockets wrong sides up, so the right sides are touching. Pin the pocket pieces together, do not pin it to the pants. Now to sew the pockets together, you're going to lift them up off of the pants and sew around the inner pocket. We're not sewing the pocket to the pants, we're just making the pocket lining. For step 8, you're going to lay your pattern piece 3 over your laid out pants and mark where your circles and squares line up over your pockets. This is where you're going to baste your pockets to the pants. See your sewing directions to see exactly where you'll be basting. I pinned the entire pocket shut, but you'll only be basting the 2 spots. Step 9 is only stitching the top of your waistband. Just follow your previous stitch. This time, instead of basting the waist, you'll be locking your stitches in place. Be sure to flatten the pleats before sewing over them. In step 10, you're going to need your pattern 4 pieces, your single piece of fusible interfacing, and both cloth pieces. Get out your ironing board and iron. I went ahead and set my iron on medium heat. Grab one of your cloth pieces and lay it wrong side up. Now take your interfacing and lay it fusible side down onto your fabric. The side with the small white dots is the fusible side. Make sure everything is lined up and pin in place. Leave enough space to make a seam of sorts with your iron. Now go along the edges with your iron. When done, check to make sure it is fused properly. After your pins are removed, place a damp towel if your interfacing instructions call for it, and place over your cloth. Take your hot iron and hold it in place long enough to fuse. The instructions that come with your interfacing will tell you how long this will take. Be sure that your fabric and interfacing are fused. If not, iron again. For step 11, you're going to need the piece of fabric from pattern piece 4 that you did not fuse to the interfacing. Grab your ruler and something to mark with. With your fabric wrong side up, find the edge with the notches. Find 5/8 inch on your ruler and mark your fabric. Fold and pin along this line. Press the fold with your iron. I use mine at medium heat. Once flat, measure 3/8 inch from the top of the edge you just pressed and trim that off. You will now be left with 2/8 of an inch of a pressed edge. For step 12, you're going to pin the facing to the waistband. You'll need the piece of cloth you just pressed and the cloth and inner facing you fused together. Lay the fused piece right side up and lay the facing on top of it wrong side up. Line these up and pin. The notches and press line should be on the bottom. Now just stitch these pieces together. We did not understitch since everything is the same color. Trim off your seam allowance as close as possible. In step 13, turn the facing to the inside and press. I pinned mine in place just to be safe. Now take your iron and press the edge. Step 14 is pinning the now finished waistband to your pants. Don't worry, this isn't going around your entire waist, this is only the front waistband. Lay your waistband flat, right sides up. The notches should be at the top. Now lay the waist of the pants over the waistband, matching notches. Pin in place. Now just sew straight across. Make sure your pockets are out of the way so you don't accidentally end up sewing them to the pants. Now trim off your seam allowance. Be sure to cut slow since there's a lot of fabric to go through. Make sure you don't cut through any of your seams. Pressing the seams down is up to you. Once done, your front waistband will look like this. For step 15, you're going to need pattern pieces 5, the back pant legs. Lay one pant leg out right side up and lay pattern piece 5 on top. You're going to need this to be wrong side up. Line up your notches and pin at the inner leg. Repeat on the next pant leg. Do not sew the crotch. Only sew at the base of the crotch curve and down to the bottom of the pant leg. Repeat. In step 16, we will be stitching the crotch. Fold the pants sideways so the crotch makes a U shape. The wrong side should be up and right sides touching. Line up all of your notches and pin in place. Now you're going to sew the crotch seam starting at the top notch and sew down to the bottom. See your sewing directions for a detailed image of your sewing line. Once you do the first stitch, stitch again 1/4 inch away from the first stitch. Now just trim off your seam allowance, but don't cut off your second seam, you need both. In step 17, you're going to need pattern piece 6. Before unpinning, mark your fold line. Now unpin and unfold your fabric. Make sure your fabric is wrong side up. Now fold on your marked fold line. You can either pin or iron your fabric in place. I went ahead and ironed since it's going to be permanently folded anyway. I then pinned it before sewing. Baste the open sides together, creating a tube. Sadly, my video did not record, so enjoy my pretend sewing. For step 18, you're going to need that casing you just made in step 17. Pin it to the back waist of your pants. Pin so that the right sides are both facing up with the original seam line of the casing at the top. Now sew your first seam. Now sew your second seam 1/4 inch away from your first seam. Sew towards the open edge, meaning your first seam is the furthest in. Your finished product should look like this. Now all you have to do is trim off the excess cloth close to your second stitching. Then just press your seams flat. Step 19 is sewing each casing to put your elastic into. Take your pattern piece 6 and mark along your casing where your stitching lines will be. Now follow each line. Remember, we aren't sewing the casing shut, we're just turning it into 4 separate casings. If you have not yet done so, cut your elastic. You should have 4 even pieces. Take a safety pin and attach it to the end of one elastic piece. Feed the pin through one hole. This will give you something to hold on to while feeding your elastic through. Next, the pattern calls for you to baste your elastic. Do not baste. Fully sew your elastic in place. If not, you risk losing your elastic inside the casing because the stitching easily comes undone due to the tension. Step 22 is just trimming your elastic. In step 23, you're going to lay your pants down right sides together so each waistband matches up. The extra flap of cloth will go over the elastic waistband. Pin the whole waistband down to keep the extra cloth out of the way, then pin down the edges of the pants. Now go ahead and sew all the way down the pant leg edges, being sure not to sew the pockets shut. Don't be afraid to go over the waistband a few times before finishing your stitch, since this is where all of the tension from your elastic will be. Trim away any excess afterwards. In step 25, you're going to turn that extra flap back to the inside of the pants and press in place if you need to. Pin so the small edge that was pressed under hides the seams. Now you're going to need a needle and thread because this entire piece is going to be hand sewn. To lock your first stitch, put your needle through, now put it through a second time, and then feed it through the loop. I do this 2 to 3 times just to make sure that this is kept in place. Now continue to hand stitch as shown across the entire waistband. Now for the last step, you're just going to need to hem. Have a good reference photo and wear your pants as the character you are wanting to cosplay would. Grimmjow wears his low, so just keep that in mind whenever you put them on. Now pin where your hem should stop. Remember, your hem will take about 1 inch of fabric, so pin lower than what you're wanting. Grimmjow's pants stop above the ankle, so we're going to pin just below the ankle. Now lay your pants flat out, and one at a time measure and pin across the bottom. Afterwards, cut and repeat on the other leg. Now measure 1/2 inch and fold. Now what you're going to want to do is pin across the entire bottom of that 1/2 inch fold. If your fabric is a little stiffer, you may be able to skip the first set of pins. Once this is done, fold 1/2 inch again and pin again. Now just go ahead and sew your hem. Once you're finished, this is what your hem should look like on each leg. And now that you're all finished, these are what your pants should look like. Here's the white version for Grimmjow. As you can see, they're being worn very low on the waist, hit right at the ankle. You've got your pockets, very wide and flowy. Now we have the previous ones that I had made for Rukia. These ones sit very high on the waist, but they also hit right at the ankle. So you've got the same cut of pants, but made specifically for each character.